Let's speak to the immigration lawyer, Ivon Sampson. Ivon, I said at the beginning of the show, and I've said it throughout, that whether somebody is left-wing or right-wing, whether they come at this from the immigration at this level is unacceptable, or whether they come at this from the humanitarian side, we can all agree this cannot go on. Good afternoon.
Absolutely. And there's also the security aspects as well, Ian. We're having undocumented people coming across into our country. I don't know any other country which would allow such a thing. So it's quite... But we have to also look, when did it start? And the small boats crossing crisis started after Brexit. And the reason being is that there was a returns agreement prior to Brexit, but the Conservative government so hell-bent on getting Brexit done that no one was doing the thinking of what would happen after we leave the EU. And what the traffickers had done, they realised, the traffickers, well, there's no returns agreement. You can't send them back. And that was the business model that they now fully exploit. As a report by Professor Tom Brooks of Durham University in February, and what he said was, he said there's a clear connection between us leaving the EU and the rise of the small boats crossing. And he puts it down to a failure by the British government or to agree a returns agreement. We need a returns agreement. The French were stopping it before Brexit. They've suddenly decided not to do it after Brexit.
So we wouldn't have had those kind of numbers, because prior to the boat thing, I don't know who first came up with the idea of a boat, or who the first time an actual boat came across the channel with people in it. Prior to that, I think I'm right in saying, Ivon, people tried to run through the Channel Tunnel, smuggle themselves onto trucks. We remember those images of people trying to get onto trucks, even in the backseat of some people's cars under a rug. You know, those were the kind of stories we would typically hear, but it wasn't in these numbers, right?
No, it wasn't these numbers. And there's the technology in detecting, apprehending those getting into trucks got better and better.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody realised that you could get bulk numbers in boats, and if you lose a few, then it's they don't really bother them, does it? Because it's thousands and thousands of pounds are being paid per person to cross the channel. So there's a vast amount of money to be made. No, it's clear we need an agreement. And you know what the French want? They want some sort of free movement back. Now, what shape that takes, I don't know. But one of the things being bandied about is the Erasmus scheme. And I don't know about you, Ian, but wouldn't you rather having European Union students coming across for, say, a couple of years, being able to work, than undocumented migrants? I know which one I would choose.
Who aren't able to work, of course.
Who can't work, who cost us money.
There is the Reform UK position, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Ivon. I know you follow all of their every policy move, is that you can actually physically turn boats back. They argue that the French are breaking the law in allowing this to happen. They say the evidence is there in Belgium, where there used to be boats leave from Belgium, no longer, because the Belgians did what they should do. The French are breaking the law, and we would have the right to literally, physically turn boats around.
No, look, we're a sovereign state. We can do whatever we want. But do we want to follow the example of the French or even the Italians in their hard borders? I hear stories of asylum seekers literally being turfed out the country across the border. Even those who want to claim asylum, their asylum claims are not being considered. No,
well, a lot of people would quite like to see that, yes.
Well, I'm sure there's always a small proportion who'd like to.
But that solves the problem, doesn't it? If you kick people out who aren't meant to be here, then you don't have a problem.
No, there's another way. There's a third way in. The one that complies with the law and complies with our obligations under international treaties. Now, I know Richard Tice. I've met him many times. I like Richard. This is the thing, though. We've got to comply with our also international treaty obligations. UNCLOS and SOLAS are the two main ones. And once someone gets into our territorial waters, we have a positive obligation to save them. Now, the French, quite happily, would like to see them get into our territorial waters, and they don't bother stopping them.
So it becomes our problem, not theirs, right?
It becomes our problem, absolutely. Now, they overtly break international law. Even I would say they encourage people to come across. But I mean, I've no evidence of that. But you know what? We need a treaty. Once you get an EU treaty, then the French would have a legal obligation, and they could be fined for not complying with the terms of that treaty.
Just talk me through, if you can, Ivon. This is a broad question, so I know it's impossible to answer this specifically. We often hear that, you know, I don't know, 75% of people who claim asylum do have their, eventually have their applications processed in their favour and are able to stop. There is understandably, and I'm probably right at the front of the queue for this, a lot of cynicism around how that happens. We know that you could game the system if you want. You can suggest you're, a Christian in a Muslim country like Iran, and therefore you can't go back because you'll be beaten to death and hung by a crane. You can claim all sorts of other sort of issues, like you've converted to Christianity, so also you can't go back. If you've come from Eritrea, for example, and we understand, and I don't think there's full confirmation on this, but that boat yesterday was full of people mostly from Eritrea. We're not at war with Eritrea. I don't dispute Eritrea is, you know, not the best country in the world to live in, but not being the best, not liking your country is not a reason to claim asylum. So you have to wonder, would this boat have been full of converted Christians, gay people, or, you know, those that for some reason couldn't go back? Because the smart money seems to say, Ivon, that that's what those people would claim at interview stage.
No, I deal with the Home Office. I was in court yesterday in Bradford, and the Home Office presenting officer was poorly trained. He didn't have a grasp of the facts. In fact, there were gaping holes in our case, and he didn't see any of that. We need proper functioning Home Office immigration officers at the highest calibre.
But do you believe that 75% of people that come across in small boats are legitimate refugees?
Well, look, every case it's really difficult, that question to answer, because every case is different, Ian. And the immigration judges are not idiots. They're top quality judges who understand the immigration rules very well. No, I think you can play the system. Take the gay claim to be gay. I mean, it is virtually impossible to prove that someone is or is not gay, other than the evidence which they give and whether it's believed or not. It's plausible, it's credible, it's consistent. Those are the things the judges look at. And no doubt there'll be some people playing the system. Same with Christianity, conversions to Christianity. There'll be some people who will play the system, will read the Bible, understand the Bible, be able to quote verses from it, and when they're interviewed by the Home Office, would be quite convincing that they had converted. So there's no doubt. But I think we need to look at the Refugee Convention as a whole. It was not meant for people fleeing war-torn areas. That was not the point of it. The point was that you were fleeing persecution from your own countries, that your own state was not protecting you. And I think it's moved on from that. And it seems to be that every country which is suffering some sort of war and there's displaced people, they can then come over to the UK and we have no return.
And make that clear indeed. Listen, Ivon, I have to stop there for time. We could talk a lot longer. Thank you, Ivon Sampson, immigration lawyer.